Hey everyone, this is John at LiquidHaus. We wanted to make a video that talks about and shows you guys an assembly of one of our ISO chassis that recently went on pre-order. It's actually almost over, but we're extending it to the end of April. And so obviously this is going to be a build actually that we're going to be taking to LVLUP Expo in Vegas next week. But we wanted to show you guys basically an overview of the assembly of the chassis itself, and then obviously hardware that will be going onto the chassis. We're going to be doing a really fun water-cooled build with water-cooled CPU and RAM. We're leaving the GPU air-cooled, but everything else is water cooling. We've added a rear 140 radiator to the mix, as well as obviously the main 420. But just going to show you guys the basics on how to assemble the ISO, and then we're going to do a build with it. So the first step to an ISO build is actually mounting the 420 radiator. And this is because it creates the proper structural integrity that you need for an ISO to kind of be able to balance the weight around. And so what you mainly do is you set the 420 radiator down, and then you set the main L piece from the ISO down on the radiator. And then it's just as simple as using the provided hardware that we will give you with each ISO order. And that basically entails an M4 screw with a nylon washer. And now the reason we use the nylon washer for all the screws here is so that if you want to adjust, you're not having metal on metal with the stainless steel that we have, because we use 304 brushed stainless steel. And so we use nylon underneath that, so in case you want to adjust your hardware, it's not a big deal to slide the hardware around without any sort of scratching on the material itself. Now that we have the 420 radiator mounted to the main part of the ISO chassis, the next step is actually the power supply. And the reason we use the power supply as the second step is so that as soon as the power supply is mounted to the bottom, we'll actually be able to stand this up and be able to do the rest of the assembly with it fully standing up. So all this includes for this install is just two simple screws on these little back sliding adjustable slots. And we're using an InWin 1300 watt power supply, and so we're gonna actually adjust this all the way forward since it's not a very long power supply. Okay, with those two screws in, obviously you can see the power supply bracket is in, so now we just install the power supply. Now that we have the power supply installed, you can kind of see that the ISO is actually already taking shape. We have the power supply down here as the foundation weight base, so this is kind of what's causing this whole assembly right now, already standing up. So now we're going to mount the motherboard panel. Now if you're paying attention closely, you can see that this screw right here looks a little bit different from the others. That is actually on purpose. So with the motherboard mounted, rotated, you'll see the 8-pin APS goes right here. And this screw is just to reduce the overhead limit so that the clip can actually clip into the EPS. Now that we have the motherboard panel mounted up, there's actually a good amount of options that we can use on the back side. Now I'm wanting to show this even though we're actually mounting a rear 140 radiator on the back. However, our ISO chassis actually comes with a GPU relocation bracket that will allow it can stand up or it can hang down. So this is if you wanted to run a Ryzen cable through this slot right here from the front of the motherboard around to the back, and then you could have the GPU either hanging down or standing up with this included bracket. But we're not going to be doing that. We're actually going to be mounting this 140 radiator to the back side. Now, if you followed us on Instagram, you can actually kind of see some of these pre-installed configurations. We've done distros in the back. We've done, now this is actually our first time mounting a radiator to the back, normal fans in the back, and then the GPU on the back in different variations. But we're gonna be using the GPU directly onto the motherboard in the front, and then the rear 140 right here. So let's mount the rear 140 first, since we have to install that before we install the motherboard. So the design actually includes a spot to mount a 140 fan or a 140 distro. Now, These holes are actually pre-tapped. So what we're gonna do is actually run the screw through into the radiator directly. And even though both materials are tapped, you can still mount something to it without any worry about the fact that two different materials are tapped versus a non-tapped and a tapped material. So we're actually using a screw and spacer setup for this to actually move the radiator away from the motherboard panel so that the exhaust can breathe a bit. So that's what you're seeing. Obviously, the spacers will not be included with every chassis purchase, but it's very easy for you to set it up yourself with some either nylon spacers or like we're using stainless steel spacers. Now the key here, being that both materials are tapped, is just to apply pressure as you tighten this screw. That way it holds tight for a perfect match. Now that we have rear radiator mounted, you can see the spacer gap right here, which is just enough. And now we mount the motherboard. First are the standoffs. Now each ISO will come with 4 1/2-inch 632 standoffs so that you're able to mount up an ITX motherboard to this panel. Now it's time to mount the motherboard. Now every ISO build has the ITX motherboard facing IO down. And this actually is a feature, not a bug. So all those who are in favor of traditional motherboard setups, get used to it. All right, so now we have our ITX motherboard installed. As you can see now, we will install the GPU bracket, the PCI slot, so the graphics card can mount vertically. Now that we have the GPU bracket installed, now it's time to mount the GPU. So this is one of the coolest parts about the ISO design, is that this is a very GPU-centric design in the sense that it completely showcases the GPU. All right, so now that we have the GPU installed, as you can see, this build is already really coming together pretty quickly. That's the really cool thing about these ISO builds, is that for the most part, it's pretty simplistic and you can pretty quickly put up a really cool looking build. So now that we have the GPU installed, we've got the 2 radiators. Now it's actually the time to install either a BLK accessory bracket that we can have installed along this edge right here, or we can have it mounted right here, or on the top above the motherboard, or even below right here. Now, we're not going to use a BLK, and we're not using the vertical GPU, being that the GPU is over there. We're actually going to use the DDC, universal DDC mount. We are using a Bitspower distro. It's one of their new ones, so it comes with the Nebula pump. And we've actually included some spacers on this one that actually pulls the screws off from the initial part of the Nebula and brings them out above so that we can actually use our DDC bracket for this instance. Last but not least is the Vandal button switch bracket, if you will. This little button can be relocated to a bunch of different places around the chassis. It's the same way with any of the other brackets, but we're gonna actually put this right here and we're gonna mount it inverse so that we've got the power button in this bottom corner right here. Now with every ISO chassis, you will get one of these Vandal buttons and some wiring, but you won't have sleeved wiring. Now, obviously, we had pre-sleeved this wire to like go with the rest of the aesthetic of the build, but every ISO chassis will get one of these little power buttons with this little bracket. So as you can see, about 95% of the ISO build is done. All we have left are our sleeve tubes that we're obviously gonna sleeve because that's what we do. And then we have the cables. So let's do with the power view tube, a quick edit for the tubing aspect, and then we're gonna dive into about the details of the cables. So with that, all right, so as you can see, the build has definitely come together now, and it really didn't take that much work or effort or time at all, honestly. I mean, obviously this is a quick edit YouTube video, but for the most part, this is a pretty easy to do build with our ISO chassis. Now, obviously we are missing a big component here, the cables. So the reason we kind of waited to the last minute to talk about the CableMod cables is because with CableMod, they're gonna be the best option for ISO cables. Now, because of that, we are working with them, we are partnering with them on the ISO launch so that every ISO order actually comes with a CableMod discount. So you guys can save as much money as possible when you're ordering your custom cable links, because we do have recommended cable links on our website for when you order an ISO. But let's not talk about it anymore, let's actually install the cables. All right, so we've got the build finished, and it honestly looks really good. We're really excited about it. The reason we choose these lengths is because we need the cables to flow naturally. We didn't want to jam or have anything looking like the cables are strained in any way, so it's why we have the recommended cable lengths on our website for the ISO when you purchase one, and you'll get a CableMod discount with each order. But hope you guys like the build. Obviously, this is right up our alley, and this is something we're really proud of as a whole, not just the build, but the chassis design and how everything's come together. We're really proud of it, and we hope you guys will buy one and enjoy the build, because there are so many different options to do on this chassis, and we'd love to see what you guys could do in the future. So with that being said, wraps up the video for today. If you like everything, like and subscribe. Head over to our website, check stuff out, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.